The cold was relentless, gnawing at her bones, but it wasn't the freezing wind that cut through Amelia the deepest. It was the loneliness. The feeling that no matter how much she wrapped her arms around herself, she would never is able to fill the empty space in her heart. She had lost everything, the family she once loved, the home that once sheltered her dreams. Now, all that remained were the cracked streets beneath her and the bitter winds that swept through her life like a reminder of all she had lost. But then, in the darkest corner of the world she knew, something unexpected happened. A tiny, shivering creature appeared before her, eyes full of fear, yet seeking comfort. A dog no different than herself, broken, cold, abandoned. And in that moment she knew that even in the harshest of winters, warmth could still be shared. With her last possession, her only blanket, Amelia gave everything she had left to the dog, holding it close in the night, both finding comfort in each other's fragile existence. Little did she know that act of kindness would change everything. Fate was about to offer her a gift more extraordinary than she could ever imagine. The wind howled through the narrow alleyways, biting at the skin like needles. The city was alive with its usual hustle and bustle, but it was a cruel kind of life, one that passed rights by the invisible souls on the streets, the ones who had nowhere to go and no one to turn to. Amelia had been one of those souls for over a year now, ever since her world had crumbled. She had lost her family in a fire, and the house that had once been filled with warmth and laughter was now nothing but ashes. The cold had become her constant companion, just like the empty ache in her heart. Tonight was colder than usual. The biting frost seemed to creep up from the ground, curling around her legs as she huddled under the threadbare blanket she had managed to scrounge from a shelter earlier that day. It was her only possession, and she guarded it like treasure. But just as she settled against a crumbling brick wall, a soft whimper broke through the night air. Amelia's head jerked up, her heart skipping a beat. The sound wasn't one she was used to hearing in these parts. She stood slowly, her stiff joints protesting, and peered into the darkness. At first she thought it was just a cat, a stray like so many others in the city. But then, from the shadows, a pair of glowing eyes stared back at her. She squinted and slowly, a shape emerged, small, trembling, and covered in matted fur. A dog. It was a pitiful sight. The dog, a mangy brown mutt, stood in front of her, shivering violently, its ribs jutting out under its thin coat of fur. Without thinking, Amelia walked forward, her heart already softening. She knelt beside the dog, careful not to startle it. "Hey there, little one," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind. "Are you all right?" The dog whimpered again, its body shaking uncontrollably, and Amelia's heart broke. It was then that she realized the harsh truth. The dog was in the same position as her. Alone. Cold. Vulnerable. She glanced at her blanket, the only thing that offered her warmth. It was so small, and there was no way she could share it with the dog without freezing herself to death. But the look in the dog's eyes, those desperate, wide eyes, told her that it needed her more than she needed the blanket. With a soft sigh, Amelia wrapped the blanket around the dog, pulling it close to her chest. The warmth of the small bundle began to settle her, even as the cold winds continued to howl around them. "Stay with me, little one," she whispered. "I'll take care of you. We'll survive together." Amelia hesitated, her fingers curled around the ragged edge of her worn-out blanket, clutching it tightly as if it were her last tether to the world she had known. The wind howled around her, biting through the thin fabric of her clothes, but it wasn't just the cold that made her heart feel like it was frozen in place. It was the thought of what the shelter might be like, the noise, the chaos, the judgmental eyes. She had seen how people looked at her on the streets, how they avoided her as if she were a disease, something to be ignored, something unworthy of their time. She had always stayed away from shelters for that reason. The constant noise, the harsh glances from those who thought they were better, and the feeling of being one of the forgotten, a statistic in a world too busy to care. But the man standing in front of her, he wasn't like the others. His eyes were kind, genuine. There was no judgment, no pity. Just an offering. "Come on, it's not far," the man urged, his voice warm and coaxing, cutting through the freezing winds that seemed to mirror her own isolation. He knelt down to pet Jack, who was curled up in her lap, his frail body trembling. Jack's tail wagged weakly in response, his cloudy eyes meeting the stranger's with the kind of trust that only someone who had been shown kindness could have. "We'll take care of both of you," the man added, his smile soft and reassuring. Amelia glanced down at Jack, her fingers brushing over his thin fur. He looked up at her with those wide, soulful eyes that spoke of the same pain and loneliness she had felt since everything changed. Her heart twisted painfully in her chest. The last year had been a blur of hunger, cold, and endless nights spent shivering under a tattered blanket, hoping for a change that never seemed to come. Her own survival had become a struggle of endurance, not hope. But Jack had been the one thing keeping her going. She had found him that freezing night, just as lost and desperate as she was. And now, seeing him wag his tail even so weak, it struck her that he was still fighting, still looking for love and warmth despite everything. She looked up at the man again, trying to read the sincerity in his face. For a moment, a wave of doubt flooded her, the fear that this was another trap, another empty promise. But something in the way he spoke, the way he looked at her without pity, made her feel like, maybe, just maybe, this time it could be different. She felt a flicker of hope, something she hadn't felt in so long. It was a fragile thing like a small flame in a vast, empty room. But it was there. It was real. Slowly, cautiously she nodded. "All right. We'll go." The man stood up, his face brightening with an encouraging smile. "Good. You won't regret it, I promise." He led them through the streets, guiding them to a part of the city she hadn't ventured to before. The further they walked, the more Amelia felt a strange sense of relief. The world around her seemed less harsh, less indifferent. The shelter was a quiet building, tucked between two larger structures, but as soon as she stepped inside, the warmth washed over her like a wave. The sharp contrast between the bitter cold outside and the gentle, welcoming heat inside made her breath catch in her throat. The shelter was nothing like the cold, impersonal institutions she had imagined. There was no harshness here, no glaring fluorescent lights or stale air. The room was cozy, filled with the comforting smell of soup and clean linens. The staff immediately came forward, a couple of women in their 30s who greeted her with kindness, asking about her name and Jack's, offering her a seat by the fire. They took Jack in their arms, fussing over him with gentle hands, brushing his matted fur and soothing him as if he were the most precious thing in the world. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Amelia felt something stir within her, something more than just relief. It was the recognition of a deep, unspoken need, care. Compassion. For once, she wasn't invisible. The man who had led her here lingered for a moment before offering his final words. "We'll make sure you're both comfortable. Stay as long as you need to." Then just like that he was gone. Amelia sat in a small, clean room, the warmth of the blankets wrapped around her like a cocoon. Jack was nestled at her feet, already asleep, his breathing slow and steady. She stared at the ceiling, trying to absorb the fact that after so long she wasn't alone. She wasn't cold. She wasn't invisible. For the first time in months she slept through the night, the first peaceful sleep she had had since everything fell apart. The quiet of the shelter, the soft sounds of people moving about, created a safe bubble around her. She wasn't fighting to survive anymore. She was simply surviving. The next few weeks were a blur of small comforts and routines. Every morning she woke to a hot meal, something she hadn't tasted in so long. The staff offered her kind words, made sure she was adjusting well, and encouraged her to take part in the shelter's programs. There was something healing about it, the simplicity of caring for Jack, feeding him, and watching him grow stronger with each passing day. And yet, despite all the kindness she was receiving, Amelia couldn't shake the feeling that something was still missing. She knew she couldn't stay in the shelter forever. This wasn't home, it was just a temporary stop, a chance to heal. But what came after? She was still the girl who had lost everything. Her past was a shadow that followed her, one she couldn't quite outrun. And though Jack had found his way into the light again, she didn't know how to do the same. One afternoon, as she sat outside, enjoying the rare warmth of the sun on her face, the man who had helped her appeared again. This time he was holding something in his hand, an envelope. He smiled at her, his eyes full of understanding, as if he knew she had been carrying the weight of that question all along. "I thought you might want to know something," he said, handing her the envelope. Amelia stared at it for a moment, unsure of what it could be. Slowly she opened it, her hands trembling as she pulled out a letter. She scanned the words quickly, her mind struggling to grasp what they meant. It took her a moment before it finally sank in. It was a job offer. A real, full-time job at a local animal shelter. The pay was decent and it included housing. Her heart pounded in her chest, and for a long moment she couldn't find the words. She looked up at the man, her mouth dry. Why would you help me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The man smiled, his eyes soft and full of warmth. "Because I believe in second chances, Amelia. You gave Jack a second chance when you didn't have to. Now it's your turn." Amelia blinked, trying to process the weight of his words. Felt like a dream. This was the opportunity she had never dared to hope for. A chance to rebuild, a chance to be something more than just a lost soul on the streets. She felt the fragile spark of hope flicker again, this time stronger, brighter. And for the first time in a long time, Amelia allowed herself to believe in second chances. Amelia couldn't believe it. For so long she had thought the world had forgotten about her, that she was invisible. The cold, empty nights spent on the streets, wrapped in layers of worn-out blankets, had convinced her that no one saw her. No one cared. She was just another face in a crowd of forgotten souls, discarded by society. But now fate had shown her otherwise. The kindness of a stranger, the warmth of the shelter, and the love she had shared with Jack had all come together to open doors she never thought possible. The job at the animal shelter became her lifeline. Every morning she woke up with a sense of purpose. There was a rhythm to the work, feeding the animals, cleaning their pens, taking them for walks, and comforting those who were scared or anxious. But the real reward was the connection she formed with them. Each animal she cared for reminded her of Jack. Fragile, vulnerable, but capable of so much strength and resilience. It was a constant reminder that no one, not even the broken, was beyond saving. She poured her heart into her work, giving those animals the love and care they deserved, even though her own heart had once been so empty. She began to see a reflection of herself in their faces. Just like them, she had been discarded. But now she was becoming something more. The shelter provided not only a job but the tools to rebuild her life. It was here that Amelia rediscovered the value of hard work, the strength of kindness, and the importance of compassion, not just for others but for herself as well. Jack, who had once been a frail, sickly creature, now thrived in the warmth and security of their new life. The scars from his time on the streets were still there, but they didn't define him anymore. His coat was thicker, his eyes brighter, and his steps more sure. The two of them had grown together, survivors in the truest sense. Jack had become her closest friend, a symbol of resilience, proof that even the most fragile of beings could find the strength to fight back against the darkness. In those first few months at the shelter, Amelia felt herself coming back to life in ways she hadn't thought possible. She saved a little bit of money each month, squirreling it away for a future she hadn't dared dream of before. She enrolled in online courses to improve her skills, determined to better her future and make something of herself. She even made a few friends along the way, people who had been through struggles of their own and understood the quiet weight of feeling lost. For the first time in years, Amelia didn't feel like she was constantly running from something or someone. She was simply living. But despite the newfound stability and warmth in her life, Amelia never forgot the kindness of the man who had helped her, and the dog who had saved her from the cold. She thought of them every day, especially in the quiet moments when she allowed herself to reflect on how far she had come. She would find herself staring at Jack, stroking his soft fur, and thinking back to the cold night she found him. It had been an act of compassion, simple and quiet, but it had changed everything. Amelia often wondered who that man was, why he had helped her when so many others hadn't. He had asked for nothing in return, and yet his kindness had sparked a chain of events that led her to this moment. She had never asked him for anything, she never would have even dared. But the opportunity he had given her was more than just a roof over her head. It was a chance to rebuild her life, a chance to move forward instead of staying stuck in the darkness of her past. It wasn't long before she reached a point where she felt ready to take another step forward. The shelter had given her everything she needed to begin again, but now she wanted more. She wanted to do something bigger, something meaningful with the second chance she had been given. She wanted to help others the way the man had helped her. One day after her shift at the shelter, Amelia found herself walking through the quiet streets of the city, Jack trotting beside her. She had started to feel the stirrings of something new, a dream perhaps, or maybe just a quiet hope that she had forgotten how to nurture. The city, once so intimidating and cold, now seemed full of possibility. The more she thought about it, the clearer the path became. She could start an animal rescue program of her own. She could work with shelters and other organizations to help those who, like Jack, had been abandoned and left behind. She could make a difference, no matter how small, in the lives of others who felt like they had nowhere to turn. The idea made her heart race, not with fear, but with excitement. It wasn't just about saving animals anymore, it was about saving people too. There were others out there who had lost everything, who had been forgotten by the world, just like she had. And if she could offer them a chance at a new beginning, just as she had been offered, it would mean everything. As she and Jack passed a small park, Amelia stopped for a moment, watching a young couple play with their dog. It was a simple, happy scene, one that made her heart swell with something she hadn't felt in years, joy. She realized that she had a place in this world now. She wasn't just a survivor, she was someone who could give back, who could help others see the light at the end of the tunnel. And it wasn't just because of the shelter or the man who had helped her. It was because of the resilience she had found in herself, and in Jack. He had saved her in ways he would never understand, just by being there, by sharing his quiet strength. As Amelia looked down at him, their bond solidifying with every passing day, she realized something profound. She wasn't alone anymore. And she wasn't just building a new life for herself, she was also building a future for others. The love and care she had poured into Jack, and now into the animals at the shelter, was spreading. It was growing into something far bigger than she ever imagined. Her journey wasn't over. But now, at least, it had direction. And with Jack by her side, the future seemed a little brighter, a little warmer than it had ever been before. 1 year later, Amelia stood in front of the same alley where she had first found Jack. The city had changed around her, bustling with life, but this particular street still felt like a place frozen in time. The cold breeze still blew through the narrow gaps between the buildings, ruffling the edges of the worn-down streets, but for Amelia, it didn't sting anymore. She had walked these same streets 1,000 times since that night, but this time, the chill didn't bite into her skin like it used to. This time, it only brushed against her, reminding her of who she had been, and who she had become. In her hands she held a fresh blanket, its fabric crisp and new. The edges were clean, and the warmth it promised was no longer just a symbol of survival, it was a symbol of hope. She didn't need this blanket to shield herself from the cold anymore. But, like that tattered old one she had given to Jack so many months ago, it was a way to pass on the warmth she had found. The warmth that had carried her through the darkest nights of her life. As Amelia stood there, memories flooded her, of the girl she once was, the girl who had believed she was beyond redemption, beyond help. That girl felt so distant now, like a version of herself she could no longer recognize. She had her own apartment now, a cozy little space filled with plants and the soft hum of her new life. Her job at the animal shelter had turned into something much bigger. She had started a small non-profit to rescue and rehabilitate animals just like Jack. She had built a family out of the lost souls she had met along the way, animals and people who had all found their way to her. But it wasn't just the animals that had healed her. It was the kindness she had received, the belief in second chances, the unwavering support from those who had once been strangers. And now, standing here in the alley where it all began, Amelia realized that this was where the circle would complete. The wind tugged at her hair, and just as she was about to turn away, her eyes caught something. A small, trembling figure huddled in the very spot where Jack had once been. The dog was thin, its fur matted with dirt, and its eyes wide with fear and desperation. Amelia's heart stopped for a beat as she recognized the look in those eyes, the same look Jack had given her when she had first found him. For a moment she stood frozen as if time had momentarily slipped back. This wasn't just any dog. This was a creature just as broken and scared as she had once been. A part of her wanted to turn away to leave the alley behind, but another part of her, something deep inside, knew she couldn't. She had never been able to walk away from those who needed her. Without a second thought, Amelia dropped to her knees. The dog looked up at her, hesitant at first, but then, perhaps sensing something familiar, it crawled closer to her, its small body shaking uncontrollably. Amelia gently placed the blanket around it, just as she had done with Jack, feeling the soft weight of the fabric as it settled around the dog's frail form. It was a simple gesture, nothing more than an offering of warmth and protection, but in that moment, it felt like everything. The wind still howled, but Amelia barely noticed. She was lost in the act of kindness, in the quiet understanding that, no matter how broken something was, it could still find a way to heal. As the dog snuggled into the blanket, Amelia smiled softly to herself, watching as its body slowly began to relax under her touch. It wasn't much, just a small moment in time, but for the first time, Amelia understood the true power of giving. It wasn't about receiving something in return. It was about the act itself, the simple decision to offer warmth when everything around you seemed cold. It was a lesson that had come full circle. Just as Jack had found his way to her when she needed him most, Amelia had found her way to this small creature when it needed her. And in that moment, standing on the cold, familiar street corner, Amelia knew that fate had a way of rewarding those who gave without expecting anything in return. The dog, no longer trembling, nuzzled against her. Amelia's heart swelled as she thought of how far she had come. From that girl in the alley, lonely and lost, to this woman, sitting in the very same place, offering kindness without hesitation. She hadn't just saved the dog. In a way, the dog had saved her again. By reminding her that love, compassion, and hope were never truly lost, just waiting to be shared. The wind, the chill, the alley, it all seemed so distant now. Amelia stood up, taking the dog gently in her arms, and for the first time in a long time, she felt truly at peace. She wasn't alone. And she never would be again. As she walked back toward the shelter, Jack trotting happily beside her, the small dog nestled safely in her arms, Amelia couldn't help but smile. She knew that this was just the beginning. There would be more lives to touch, more second chances to offer. The future was still full of uncertainty, but it was also filled with possibility. And in the end, kindness, she realized, was the most unexpected gift of all.